Love me sweet, never let me go.
I got to tell you a good story. When Elvis called me in 1969 to put a band together for him, we talked. You know, one of his opening line was like, "You know, I watched the Eisenhower show to watch Ricky sing a song and you play guitar on the Eisenhower show." And I said, "Wow, that's great." I mean, it blew me away. I loved it. But it goes to show you that he was aware of what was going on. He was very well aware of Rick's music.
When my dad met him for the first time, he was really nervous about it, and he was quite a bit younger than Elvis. And Elvis came out and ran over to my dad, gave him this big hug. He's like, "Ricky, I love your show," and he's treating him like a little brother. And they always had this really warm, nice relationship.
Nelson deserved to sing a song by himself after that guitar playing.
It's about time.
He's always complaining.
I'm always complaining. He's not the twin that got kicked in the head for 9 months straight.
That clears everything up for me, personally. We're gonna let Gunnar sing a song here, because I think that he does a great job with this. This was our favorite ballad that our father ever sang. And we always used to follow him around on his concert tours and stuff like that as much as we possibly could. And it didn't matter that he got older and wasn't a teen idol anymore, because there was something about, well, clearly he had a little charisma, but there was something about this song that made all the women just completely fall apart and pass out when he sang the song. I think part of it had to do with the fact that he closed his eyes when he sang. That was his style. If anybody remembers that, he would just sit there and kind of close his eyes. And everybody used to ask me growing up, why did your dad close his eyes and just kind of stand there when he sings? So I asked him one day, I was kind of messing around with him. I said, Pop, you know, I was always wondering, why do you just kind of stand there and close your eyes when you sing? I mean, are you like going to the Bahamas or something? Where do you go? What do you do? And he looked at me and he said, well, Matt, because it works. Maybe for him. I've been trying it for 48 years. It does not work for me. Not the same way. We're going to let Gunnar sing this next song. And this is for, you know, all the people who used to watch the television show, Ozzie and Harriet. They used to use, our grandfather used a really close shot. A super close up. You can see the clumps in the mascara that he was wearing. That's how close it was. It was good for million sales. And he's going to sing this next ballad, and he's going to employ the Ricky Nelson close the eyes when you sing technique to make all the women in here pass out. Good luck, sir. But he's going to do that not only with our favorite Ricky Nelson ballad, but as you'll see from this clip, our favorite Beatles' favorite ballad. Here comes a clip about Lonesome Town.
Elvis turned off a lot of parents. Ricky didn't. Pat Boone turned off a lot of kids. Ricky didn't.
There's a place where lovers go.
Ricky's heartbreaking ballad, Lonesome Town, went top 10 in the fall of '58.
I loved Lonesome Town. I just thought it was a kind of nice, dark little ballad. There's a place where lovers go
To cry my troubles.
Lonesome Town.
so darn cool. Phase of his career. Is it okay if we kind of talk about something that we were actually there for? I gotta go into the 60s, don't worry about it. We're gonna come back to the 50s. Stay with me, it's quite a ride. I'm blonde, trust me.
I gotta say this. You know, they turned the lights on. You guys are a hardy bunch here in Canada. Because I think the critters that are in the air, the flies in the air have black belts or something. They think I'm their leader. It's bad enough to eat them, I promise, but snorting them while you're singing is awful. In the middle of a nice tender ballad, you know, it's right at the end there.
They're crunchy.
And they started doing jumping jacks in my nose.
They're crunchy, they're crunchy. That's a good thing. Well, they think he's delicious too, so they have to. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to the middle of the 60s. 1966, the Ozzie and Harriet Show ended its run after 435 episodes on television in America. Yep, the longest running live action TV sitcom, actually in television history. It was on the air as a radio show 2 years before that. So our dad basically worked his entire life to find himself out of work in his early 20s. Basically retired. And it didn't take a genius to figure out by looking around that everything that he had started with in the rock and roll era, you know, the guys with his friends like Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and stuff like that, you know, they were finding it hard to find work. As a matter of fact, Elvis was doing those movies that Gunnar was talking about just to kind of keep the cash flowing. Jerry Lee Lewis, I think he was hanging out in Europe with his cousin or something like that. You guys are hipper than that, come on, loosen up. And our dad found himself basically at home, retired, and he decided to expand his family, which worked out very well for the two of us, I must say. But we grew up with what we call a very, very normal childhood. Completely normal, actually, you know. To us, it was completely normal. I guess consider this. It was normal for us to have everybody in the world ask your father for autographs, same thing with your grandparents. And the hippies that hung out at our house in the Hollywood Hills, we found out later, weren't just regular run-of-the-mill hippies, they were famous hippies. The guy with the crazy hair that wouldn't leave turned out to be Bob Dylan. Our next door neighbor we called Uncle George because he was over so much was actually George Harrison from the Beatles. And our babysitter was Mama Cass Elliot from the Mamas and Papas. It's true. We were hungry for years. We learned how to hide our Happy Meals, I'll tell you. She was an awesome lady. She was kind of like ground zero at that time for all things creative in the Hollywood Hills. And she just, for some reason, liked hanging out with the Nelson kids, and we were tiny at the time, but my first real conscious memory was actually being driven by Mama Cass Elliot through the very first McDonald's drive-thru, which was in Studio City, California, in her beautiful, gleaming, convertible, bright white Rolls Royce. I mean, every kid goes through that, right? Totally normal childhoods, we tell you. That's right. But we found out later, though, that these people were hanging out not just because our dad was somebody that they knew. It was the fact that they felt it was a disservice to the world that he was retired. They wanted to bring him out of retirement and tried to convince him. That's why they were hanging out there. If you read Bob Dylan's autobiography, on page 14, there's an entire thing about his relationship with our dad musically as far as wanting to be like him and starting that way. So here he was now, and all these people, the biggest stars on the musical planet, and our dad was the opposite of it. As a matter of fact, it was Dylan that turned to him one day in the den at the house and said, you know, Rick, I'm going to talk to you like nobody seems to want to talk to you about. There's this huge elephant in the middle of the room. And we got to talk about the fact that the kids all over the world figure that you're washed up and over. You're a has-been. So why don't you do something that screws them up? Well, Bob, it's always nice having you over at my house. Thank you very much. What do you have in mind? He said, well, why don't you try writing songs? I mean, the 60s are all about people writing their own music. In the 50s, guys like you and Elvis had got people write their tunes. And he was right about that. Elvis actually wound up never writing a song of his own. He was just the world's greatest interpreter, and he was amazing. But in the 60s, he said, everything's all about, guys like me, the Beatles, the Stones, you gotta write your own music. He said, basically, he kind of challenged him, I think, that day, because he basically put it to him this way: what do you have to lose? And he was right. For the first time in our dad's life, nobody was watching him. So he decided to start writing his own tunes, and it turned out he had an amazing ability as a songwriter. He wrote a song called Garden Party, which we're going to get to later on in the show. But at this time, Gunnar and I made our debut, and were there when he formed something called the Stone Canyon Band. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now gives credit to Rick Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band for being at the very, very forefront of a movement that came out of Southern California in '67. There was a little club there. It was the same venue that it all happened at. And in '67, you could see Rick Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band. You could see Linda Ronstadt and her first band, the Stone Ponies, the Byrds, the Hollies, Poco, the Burrito Brothers, the Buffalo Springfield, Jackson Brown, Joni Mitchell. It was this whole movement. And our dad's bass player from the Stone Canyon Band 2 years later formed a group of guys. I honestly think that they're in for some success. Nobody agrees with me. They're called the Eagles. You should listen for them. I like them a lot. But that's what we grew up with, was that Southern California country rock sound. And for the first time in our dad's career, all those people, all those haters that wanted to write him off as just being a pretty boy or a made-for-TV guy, had to take a different look at him, because he was the real deal the whole time. And he had something to say. So we're going to go to that era right now with some film. We found some Super 8 film in our family. Actually, we have a film vault, and we found this. It was the only bit of this film left. This is the dad we remember. He always had an acoustic guitar in his hand, writing songs and stuff like that. And there's a 10-second montage at the very beginning of this. And I'm going to humbly submit this. You'll see that when Gunnar and I make our debut in this, that our moves have not changed at all in all of these years. And when our career is over, I humbly submit, and maybe time will tell, that they'll say, nobody in rock and roll history rocked Huggies like the Nelson Twins. Check this out.